targeted or get displaced. Lots of them, much more of them get killed in disasters than men do. And tsunami is a perfect example. So in Sri Lanka, I think up to 80% of those that died were women. They're the ones actually that are taking care of the families. They are the ones that ensure that kids are taken out, that their elderly parents, that the sick in their families, people with HIV, AIDS, and disabled get taken care of. So they're also carrying a disproportionate burden of taking care of everybody in emergencies.
Humanitarian work is actually a $10 billion industry. And this is an industry that is probably only going to grow in proportion because we do know that there's only going to be more humanitarian disasters, a lot of them brought on by climate change. And when a natural disaster strikes or conflict strikes, women are differentially impacted. Oxfam Canada just organized a conference on women's rights and humanitarian response. And this was a first meeting. It was really, we were trying to test the waters, if you will, to find out if there's an appetite, if there's an energy, if there are resources around to actually rethink the ways in which Oxfam's, other humanitarian organizations actually respond to the needs of communities on the ground and front women's human rights agenda in a humanitarian response.
The majority of the people that we're working with, that we're delivering humanitarian assistance to or trying to work with on saving lives, they're women. They're usually the ones that have been displaced. They are 70% to 90% of the people that are in camps.
We've done an analysis of about 17,000 emergency projects under the Common Appeals process for humanitarian response. And we found that out of that amount, which amounts to 16 billion for those countries, about 243 million is specifically targeting women's needs. So that's 1.5%.
It's mostly women. It's women and children who collect water in multiple cultures. But you've got engineers siting where water points go, and certainly geophysically, there are certain areas where it can go, but how the safe siting happens, the majority of rapes happen between village and water point, how that whole siting happens, the whole collection of water processes, there's all sorts of risks all the way around that. So having a local women's organisation actually physically doing the work of that, not just being consulted on and, let's just send the women's organisation out to do a bit of monitoring afterwards, that's a good start. But to have the whole cycle of project management doing that, and does it reduce risk?
And then we also need to include women in the opportunities that particularly agencies or governments provide to people to reconstruct their lives. They cannot be the ones taken care of at home. They have to be part of the community recovery and livelihoods recovery plans, because in most communities, women have a role to play and often have their own livelihoods.
We've heard some great examples of good practice from all over the world. And Maniki Gunnatilake, for example, talked to us about the example in Sri Lanka.
We got to design the initial first 3 days of the camp setup. So that was crucial in informing a more women's rights perspective and creating a space for women. They created a space to talk about violence and have visual material that identified violence, and then created a preventive environment in the camp, defining the different types of violence women face as well. And they also use their local links in those communities to stop situations like early marrying off of young girls.
There are individual force commanders who interpret their mandates generously and broadly. And that's just great, but it's not good enough. We can't have positive examples relying primarily on the discretion and personality of individual task leaders.
So in a way, the system itself needs to change, that we need to bring more women in doing the humanitarian work for humanitarian agencies who will then understand the needs of the women on the ground, their capacities, and in a way, we need to diversify who is doing humanitarian work more.
Humanitarian responses that address women's needs and that were women-centric would build the public credibility and power of women as leaders and ensure that they end up taking an equal share of governance opportunities. And that should end up in more equitable resource allocation so that women benefit as much as men from public spending decisions.
If you've got 70 to 90% of the people that you're working with are women, then let's see if women delivering that response will actually lead to bring out things that haven't been thought of before. It's not that revolutionary, but it hasn't been done.
In many ways, we don't often think enough about how there is opportunity in crisis. And for many women, this is an opportunity to transform community, to transform gender relations. For many, this is an opportunity to rebuild communities with transformed power relations. So is there a potential for a humanitarian response to take that crisis as an opportunity and to transform power so that women and girls have more rights at the end of the day? It's a question that this conference really tried to answer.